how do you get to Midland of all places? Because when you and I had a conversation, we did your pre-interview, and if you've read it, you saw that Katie said you had friends that were like, "You're going to Midland? Isn't like Midland boring? Like, what are we doing in Midland, Michigan?" And
especially if you're living in Traverse City, like, because TC is so engaging, right?
Absolutely.
And so alive. And yeah, people are like, really, Midland? And I was like, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, and this is not to talk down on the place
No,
that like we love and we live and we're
Yeah.
building community in, but I understand where that perception comes from
Totally.
for sure. So
Yeah.
what did your introduction to our community look like, and what did that feel like for you?
Yeah, so I had been to Midland, I think maybe 2 times before actually moving here. So I had a friend from high school, middle school, high school, who lived here, worked for Dow. So I had come over to visit Sarah at some point in time. And then I ended up being the president of the Michigan Presenters Network. Again, it was like, oh, you're the youngest person in the room. Let's just give you a nonprofit to run. So I became the president of that in December of 2016, and wanted to bring back the annual conference for Michigan presenters. It hadn't been done for a handful of years, and it's an important part of that organization is to create networking and professional development opportunities. So was looking around, talking with colleagues. Past president Brian Howe, who's the VP of programming at the Midland Center for the Arts, sort of was like, here's all my institutional knowledge. So I really learned a lot about the organization from Brian and got all the files and what I needed. And he said, let's host the conference in Midland. We can give you the facility for free. Like, I'll help you with the hotel, whatever. So June of 2018, we hosted the Michigan Presenters Conference here at the Midland Center for the Arts. I was here for 2 days. I was like, wow, this is actually a really nice town, beautiful flowers, great parks, like all the things
Badass Tridge, all the good stuff.
The Tridge, yeah, H Hotel, stayed at the H, very nice. I was like, oh, this is great. So that was June of 2018, and so met colleagues here. We gathered folks from around the state, and then in December of 2018, I got a random phone call from Brian offering me a job, and it was because of the connections I had made through Michigan Presenters and the hard work I had put into reviving that organization from basically dead to like a very robust organization over the course of that year, that they thought, we want Katie to be our new manager of community engagement, which was a job that didn't exist at the time. They weren't really doing community engagement programming in any sort of like really formalized way. And they wanted to do that. And so they said, do you want a job? And I said, how long do I have to think about it? Because I was actually interviewing for another job at Interlochen at the same time. And I knew I was getting an offer. And so the timing was just kind of serendipitous. I basically had 3 days from them calling me to like having to make a decision to move to Midland. And obviously we moved to Midland. So yeah, that's how that happened.
And then you were with the Center for the Arts for a few years, and now we're so fortunate to have you at the Midland Area Community Foundation. But something that's been consistent throughout your entire career, and something that I recognize with you here in Midland, is just your community involvement in so many different ways. And there feels like there's a real intersection for you between life, work, personal, art, but then also really working in the spaces of uplifting other community members and making sure everybody feels included. And that is a really special trait to have in a community member, and we could take so many more of them here. What is that calling for you, and why is there such that intersectionality basically throughout your work, throughout your entire career?
I don't know. I think it goes back to my time with the Youth Advisory Council. I think that's when I first got a taste of why it's important to care about your community and why it's important to be engaged in a very deep way. And my parents are incredible examples of that themselves. They are always volunteering. They always encourage us to volunteer. Like, we were always involved with our church and our communities and volunteering at this and volunteering at that and that sort of thing. But I think YAC is where I really got a sense of the wider world and the wider community. And so starting to understand why Muskegon was the way it was. So learning about redlining, for instance, and why Muskegon is segregated as it is, and it still is to this day. Massively. What the socioeconomics of our community, in issues that impacted youth in particular, but thinking about education funding, like, we gave $500 classroom grants to individual teachers so they could fund a project in their classroom. And you're sitting there as a 16-year-old going like, why are we giving a teacher $500? Shouldn't this be paid for by the school? Right? And so those questions start turning, and you start interrogating that even as a young person. And I think that's where that really started. And I just think I've always it unlocked something. And then I had an incredible teacher in high school, my government and economics teacher, Steve Sinaki, who really believed and taught me to believe in the power of civic engagement and the power of government, the power that government can have to improve people's lives. It doesn't always, but there is that potential if you do it right and you have the right people in the right spots, in the right places. And so he really influenced me and really taught me about, civics and government and the power of that an individual can have and the collective can have too at the same time. I think those two things really set me up to go to school, to study political science. And again, I got into policy. I don't know. It just sort of like, it unlocked something in me. And I really deeply care about people. I care about their quality of life. I care about fairness and equity and people having the opportunities that they need to be successful, to thrive, whatever thrive means to them, right? I'm never going to define that for somebody.
Absolutely.
But I want everyone to have what they need to be happy and healthy and raise their kids or support their parents or whatever that is for them, so that they are not constantly worried about where their next paycheck is coming from, or that one medical bill is going to financially ruin them, or that the air that they breathe is going to make them sick. Like, these are the things that I think about all the time. And so I don't know, and I started looking at equity in terms of my performing arts work. And so it's always been woven in there. And I think art's a very powerful tool, to help facilitate those conversations. But yeah, I don't know. It's just sort of like, it's always been a part of me, and it certainly comes from certain places, but I don't know. I'm a pretty passionate person. And once I lock into something, it's like, I do it full bore.
Well, and you have a drive to do. And whenever I come across something that I want to get involved in, I think about it and like torture myself with the thought for months on end. And I really appreciate folks that just kind of go for it and do it. And one of the things that drives me to continue doing in this community is that vision statement. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about trying to build a community where everyone thrives, somebody the other day said, "You've said the vision statement so many times on the show already." And I said, and we can never say it enough. That is the story. If the story is always working for the betterment of everyone, we cannot go wrong. And I think that means the betterment of everyone, obviously within whatever the confines of the box that we're working in at the time. And I don't want that to sound too loaded on the show. But you really go for it, and you care about your fellow community member. We hope you enjoyed that clip from the Maxwell's Midland Show. If you want to watch the full episode, make sure you head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to hear that episode, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts.